Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I have a friend on with me. I have Cherie Miller. Cherie is an LPC, licensed professional counselor, and I'm really excited to have her on with me. Hey, girl, thanks for coming on with me.
Of course. Thank you for asking me. I'm excited to talk about this today.
Yes. So let me tell everyone a little bit about you, and then you can do the proper intro. So you and I met last year, probably almost a year ago now. So we, yeah, I think so. We were brought together by mutual friends who started a mastermind group for group practice owners. So you and I each own a group practice, and then once a month we get together with our cool group and we talk about all the ways to nurture our practice and just give it the time and attention that it needs to grow and how to be good bosses and all the things. So we've gotten to know each other, and this is the first time we've been wanting to record for a while. But so let me hand it over to you. Tell us about who you are, what you do, and then we'll jump into our topic.
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, my name is Cherie Miller, and I am a licensed professional counselor supervisor in the state of Texas. And I do have a group practice out here in South Lake. So, we are a team of therapists and dietitians because one of our several specialties that we do is eating disorders and body image stuff. We also work with OCD and trauma, substance use, and a host of women's issues. And I am loving this second half of my career where I get to be a therapist and do this work. And I'm really passionate about it because I'm recovered myself. And so I always knew I wanted to be able to go to grad school and get back to this. And so I'm really happy to be doing this finally. And I could talk about these things all day because I'm so passionate about them. And they're so relevant. I think most of us, especially as women, struggle with food and body stuff on some level of the continuum. So I feel like most of us can resonate with some of these conversations.
Yes, absolutely. And what you do, that population that you work with is actually a really, really difficult population because there is so much to it that even, I mean, as providers, I think there are a lot of therapists that just don't even work with any client that has body image issues or any eating disorders because it is the approach and the treatment is so specialized. And I love that you do that. It's a really hard population to work with. And like you and I were talking off screen, um, emotionally for you as the clinician, it is very difficult, right? And so tell us a little bit about why. Why is this such a tough population to work with?
A couple of reasons. One, eating disorders are so complex, right? So there's kind of the stereotype that it's just the young, thin, white girl who wants to be skinny, and that really doesn't do it justice at all. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of layers. There's usually other mental health issues that are at play, depression, anxiety, maybe OCD. Often a lot of trauma that can play a part in that. And it's about the food, but it's not about the food, right? So it's like we've got to address things nutritionally and make sure people are getting nourished properly, so that even so that their brains are working well enough to really benefit from therapy. There can be a lot of resistance to recovery because eating disorders can somewhat become part of an identity, but there's also a lot of reinforcement. Right. So I know I got this when I was in my eating disorder, and I hear this a lot from clients that if there are body changes, people just assume if you're losing weight, that's a good thing. And so there's a lot of like praise and affirmation, and especially for people who might be struggling with self-esteem or, have a deep-seated need for others' approval, validation, that kind of thing. That feels like a really tangible way to feel loved and accepted and valued. And so that can be hard to give up, especially when you talk about if there is any kind of weight gain that happens in recovery. That's usually not celebrated in our culture. And so, it's almost like countercultural work on top of all the other complexities that are going on. So it is a tough population, but they also, I feel like, there's a lot of things stacked against them and against recovery, and a lot of reasons to stay sick, unfortunately.
Yeah. And like you said, you could be doing all the work right and really following the strategies to be healthier and take care of your body. But then you get on social media or any kind of media and you see how celebrated being thin and losing weight is, that it just creates a confusion. Like even if it's not um triggering to like, oh, I want to do that. It's just, it can, well, it can't obviously do that, but it just creates this confusion of society is telling me that gaining weight is wrong, yet here I am working effortlessly to try to be healthier, and I think the emphasis that we as clinicians try to focus on is it's not about the number, it's not about the weight, it's about the health, it's about being healthy, taking care of your body, looking at nutrition differently, looking at your body differently. And that is it's a very unemphasized message in media. So you're really like as a clinician and as the client, you have a lot stacked against you as you work with that. And so you and I wanted to focus today on the impact of body image issues on a relationship, on a marriage. So, and and you tell me if I'm wrong, but like I think historically women typically struggle with this more, but men do also. There are lots of men that struggle with body image issues. And so we want to give that its due respect as well. So we'll touch on that as we go. But I think kind of going into our marriage conversation, I think typically we see it more as the woman's struggle with weight and how that does affect the marriage. So tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on with that. There is definitely a rise in body image struggles and eating disorders in men, and that has just been over the decades. And it's interesting when you look at things like if you compare like action figures from several decades ago to now, or even the superheroes in movies, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the like old school Superman TV show that was black and
Yeah.
white. Like he just kind of had a dad bod, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now those superheroes are expected to be just almost unreasonably muscular and super lean, right? And so for sure, this is becoming more and more of a problem with men. But I think that you are right in that it's predominantly a female problem in the sense that there has been this emphasis for a really long time on women and their appearance. And it goes deeper because culture really equates a female's worth with what she looks like, right? So we have a sense that our value is tied quite deeply to our level of cultural attractiveness, based on conventional beauty standards, which I throw that out there to say and like point out that like those change, right? And so what is considered attractive and desirable in one time is not necessarily in another, right? Even in my lifetime, I've seen this switch. There's the heroin chic phase, and where is much more like emaciated, androgynous, and now then it's like the voluptuous, the with the big booty and the big, the big chest but the small waist, and so it changes too. It's very subjective, and it's quite an elusive thing that we're always trying to chase after, but yeah, for sure. It affects us so deeply as women, again, because we feel like it's tied to our worth and how lovable we are, how much our partners may desire us and feel attracted to us. And so it can bring a lot of insecurity in a relationship that can really be a barrier to, especially physical intimacy.
Yeah. And as I think about it, and I even think of like because working with couples, sometimes you hear obviously the woman talk about if she's struggling with body image issues, you hear her talking about it and how she's unhappy with herself and wants to work on something. But then I've had men that I've been working with as well over the time that are like, I'm trying to figure out how to not be a jerk, but my spouse doesn't look the way she looked or she doesn't take care of herself the way she used to. And so it's figuring out that balance of like how do we prioritize health without prioritizing weight, but also being considerate of ourselves. Like it's this whole thing, and I can't tell that spouse because I've also had women who are in really good shape and their spouse, their husband is not anymore and used to be in really good shape, not anymore, the quote unquote let himself go or let herself go. And it's this whole conversation of is that okay to feel? And I feel guilty for feeling that, but at the same time, I don't want to shame them. Like it's this whole complicated thing. And I honestly don't know the right answer on that, other than it's normal to feel what we feel about ourselves. It's normal to feel what we feel about our spouse, but ultimately conversations around this need to become healthier. We need to be able to talk to each other about taking care of ourselves, about making sure we're healthy, not just in a weight perspective, but our heart health, our bone health, like making sure we're setting ourselves up for long life together, regardless of the weight. So I'm throwing a lot of questions at you of like, what do you do when you have people that are struggling with their own weight like that, or are looking at their spouse and they're like, something's changed and I don't know how to talk about it?
Yeah. It's such a nuanced discussion. First of all, I like to put that out there that, there are just so many facets of this discussion. And I think even when I listen to you talk about health, I'm struck with, the privilege that comes with being able to focus on health, right? Because the reality is not everybody is in a season of life where they can do that. Right. And
Mhm.
even how we define health, right, can vary from one person to another. I mean, I have clients and friends with chronic illness, and what health looks like for them is different than what it maybe looks like for me, right? But I mean, again, to use myself as an example, I'm in a season of life where it's harder to focus on my health because I have two young children. I have a job. I am self-employed. I have a business that I run. I have two parents who are getting older that have health complications that I have to be caretakers for them. I have my marriage that I'm trying to invest in. I'm a part of a church. I lead a Bible study group. Like, I don't have a lot of time, and so, and I know there are people in other circumstances that are even more limited as far as capacity or finances. And so I just always like to throw out there, just remembering that concept of like, well, we all got the same 24 hours in a day is
Yep.
actually just not true. Because I'm like, the time constraints,
Yeah.
the responsibilities, the financial considerations are different for everybody.
And the
So
emotional bandwidth, right? Like not everyone can just
yeah,
emotionally get to where they're prioritizing taking care of even finances. Like it's different for everyone.
for sure. And again, like everybody is so different and different seasons of life. I am now in a place where I have had some health stuff going on and I've got hormone changes happening with being in early perimenopause. And so, like, my energy levels are not the same that they were, right? And I have a friend who was recently diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and her ability to exercise. She used to be an ultra marathoner. She would run over 100-mile races. She cannot do that anymore. Her body cannot handle it, right? So has her body changed since she's had to slow down? Of course it has. And I think that is part of the discussion too that's really important, is just recognizing that bodies change, and we really don't allow space for that in our culture. We really feel like, well, my partner should look the way they did when we get married, and that's pretty unrealistic for most people, because especially depending on what season of life you got married in. I mean, if you got married at 20 years old, like, no, your
Yeah.
body is not going to look the same probably in 10, 20, 30 plus years, right? And that's true regardless of how much effort you put into it for some people, because
Yeah.
whether it's chronic illness or you've gone through pregnancies or menopause, or you've had some sort of injury, right? Like, our bodies, our appearance may change. And so I think if we don't allow some space for that, we can kind of get stuck in this,
Yep.
well, they don't look like they did. Well, yeah, of course they don't.
Right. And that is exactly why it's that conversation. And that's what I try to get back to with couples and individuals. Like you have to be able to have a conversation about, well, first of all, within yourself, you have to have that awareness of what is reasonable, what is normal, what it like these changes. No one is the same as they were in any other aspect of their life than as they were 20 years ago or whatever. So how do we expect ourselves to maintain habits or appearance or whatever? And so just like with anything, whether it's hey, my spouse and I used to both be interested in this and we're not interested anymore. And I don't know what to do about the fact that they're not interested in it. It's a conversation. It's, hey, first of all, is it fair that you still have that expectation, or are you living in maybe an unrealistic perspective type thing? And also, how are you using that perspective to maybe create a rift or judgment in your marriage? And I think what you and I have both kind of seen in couples is becomes this thing that you can't talk about.
Mhm.
whether it's I'm worried about you or you're worried about me or we just don't have the same intimate relationship and we don't talk about why, like it just creates this rift and hurt and resentment when the topic itself is one that just needs to be just talk about it and have compassion for whatever it is that's going on. We have to have compassion and the ability to just talk. So how do we guide couples who, I guess, what's the starting point for our topic on that? That body image issues do play a role in marriage. Take it away.
I mean, that's so broad. Where do we go with
Yeah.
that? No, I think having self-awareness of our own stuff and what we're bringing to the table and what's ours, and kind of what you're saying, like what is fair to ask of our partners or to expect of our partners, ways that, we might need to grow and work through some things, because part of what I see too is because our culture really puts front all these messages, all these images of certain body types, we get very accustomed to that. The way our brains work is what our brains see over and over and over is what is normalized. And so I actually like to tell clients this statistic, but the average size of an American woman, depending on what study you look at, is either a 14 or a 16. And most women are like, what? That's not
Hmm.
what I would have guessed,
Yep.
because that's not what we see in the media. And again, even if we intellectually know that there's not a lot of body diversity in the media, our brain still normalizes that. And
Yeah.
so when we look in the mirror and we don't fit that image, or our partner doesn't fit that image, it may feel like there's something wrong, or we may not feel as attracted to that, because what we have seen over and over, especially if there's any kind of pornography in the mix as well, like that shapes our preferences and what we find desirable and what turns us on. And so I think that's where it's important, again, to look at, like, okay, is part of the issue, what I have exposed myself to, what I've not exposed myself to, body diversity, and how that has shaped my preferences for, again, my own body or my partner's body, and just being really honest about that. And the exciting thing about that is you can reshape that a little bit by intentionally being careful about what, again, you expose yourself to or don't, right? So
Yeah.
I always tell clients, like, diversify your social media feeds. If you're on Instagram, like,
Yeah.
look for accounts where women are in larger bodies and are older, and not just in their 20s or 30s, but like see women aging gracefully, and different abilities, different skin colors, different skin types, right? Not just the flawless, the small pored, no acne kind of skin. That's not realistic for most of us so much of the time. So I think when we give our brains a chance to realize, like, hey, this is actually what's normal,
Hmm.
I think that can help take away some of that shame or those expectations that, like, oh, there's this very narrow box that I have to fit into, or that my partner has to fit into.
Yeah. I think as you were saying that, I was like, well, what is the goal of what we want our listeners to hear? And the reality is, there is nothing that you and I could say in this episode that would solve this for anyone. And that's why it is such a niche, topic when it comes to treatment or therapy, because you have to have someone who understands and can guide you through it. But our goal is to raise awareness and just be kind of honest about the fact that body image issues are going to play a role in most marriages as we age, as we experience life, health, aging, whatever. More for some marriages than others. Some marriages maybe never go through anything relating to that because their perception is just different and they have more realistic expectations of aging and growth and hormones and whatever. But you and I wanted to kind of emphasize and just kind of give it a voice that it's okay if those changes in life, as far as your body is concerned, come into your marriage. So, how, like putting aside maybe eating disorders, how do you see body image and body changes affecting a marriage that we could just kind of help some people notice that it is a thing?
I will say I have encountered women who are with partners who are very critical of their bodies, or have very narrow expectations of what it should look like. But Typically, most commonly, what I see is actually women are the ones that are holding back because of their own body image issues and insecurity. And their husbands are like, no, I love your body. I want to be with you. I want to be intimate with you. And they're like, no, it's just too uncomfortable because I'm too insecure. I'm too worried about it. And so that is honestly the situation that I find I'm working with clients the most often. And so one of the places that I start, and sometimes it might come across a little harsh. I don't mean it to be harsh, but I just remind them that like their partner is a distinct human being that has different thoughts, values, perspectives, opinions. And when you are saying, "Hey, I don't like my body, so I don't think you actually could either." I'm like, you're taking away that person's right to have their own thoughts and opinions. And so I start with challenging clients to just recognize that, hey, I might feel this way about my body, but that doesn't mean that my partner does. And just starting with that, I'm not even trying to get them to love the way their body looks or to have a different
Yeah.
opinion about their own body, but just give their partner space to have their own opinion about their body. And because I always say, okay, we got a couple of options here. Either they mean what they say, they're lying to you. And I always kind of explore like, do they typically lie to you about things? And it's like usually the answer is like, no, not really. And it's like, okay, then are they crazy? Like, do they just not know what they're talking? And a lot of times they'll be like, well, it feels that way, but no, I mean, like, no,
Yeah.
I could see how he might think it's fine. And so we arrive at, okay, then he means it. He just has a different opinion and a different perspective than yours, and he's allowed to do that. And when you tell him like, no, you can't touch me because my body's gross, you're kind of controlling him.
I like
You're
that.
being controlling, and that's like a deeper issue than the body image stuff. And it's just like almost like a kind of moment, mind blown kind of moment where they're like, oh, I never really saw it like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah. That's
it's
awesome perspective. I love that because I think, one of the things that goes with body image issues is a self-control or control of self
mm,
type of behavior, right? Whether it's control of self and behaviors that we do, what we eat, how we dress, or just a control of self and thoughts. Like we obsess over certain thoughts about ourselves and we're very rigid in the way we think. And so I think it's such a great um, explanation of that we then try to control others even without intending to. We
exactly.
assume what people think of us, we assume that they're judging us, we assume that our flaws are just blatant for the world to see when most people aren't even remotely looking at us the way that we expect them to or we think they are. And so I love that perspective of grace, almost like just be mindful that your perspective is not right, and you can kind of apply that to every aspect of disagreement in a marriage, right? But I think there's a lot of beauty to that of and a surrendering of like, let me trust my spouse. I trust him in all these other ways. Why don't I trust him when he tells me he really thinks I'm beautiful? Or vice versa. The husband that feels insecure about his body and the wife is like, I love the way you look and perfect. Like we don't trust that.
Mhm. No, we don't. And I get it. I mean, I've
Yeah,
been there, so I understand those feelings in the moment feel so powerful. And when we're talking about physical intimacy, oh man, is there anything more vulnerable? I don't think
right.
so than standing in front of your partner with nothing on or almost nothing on. It is incredibly vulnerable and it takes so much courage to be able to sit with the discomfort that comes up.
Mm,
The other thing I like to point out though is that avoidance perpetuates that anxiety and discomfort. So if we continue to avoid being intimate, or we won't let our partner touch certain parts of our bodies, or we insist that the lights always have to be out, it has to be completely dark, right? That just perpetuates anxiety. Whereas if we challenge that by, leaving on a lamp or maybe just a closet light,
yep.
or we let them touch that body part, what happens is over time, that anxiety lessens because we adjust to that. Our brains realize, oh my gosh, okay, this isn't as dangerous as it seemed,
Yep.
right? It feels very threatening and unsafe to the nervous system. That's why we have that kind of like, very visceral, like fight or flight response that can come up when we're in that situation. But we train our bodies and our nervous systems to realize, like, this is
Yeah.
actually this is a safe place. Nothing bad happened. It was actually ended up being a very loving experience or whatever, assuming again, you're with a partner who is safe and loving and all of those kinds of things. That's important. But assuming that, you give your brain a chance to have a different experience than what it was fearing.
Yeah.
And you get to learn that, okay, maybe this is not what I was fearing it would
Yeah.
be. And it's actually a positive experience.
Yeah, and it kind of rolls into the next. So then if you can have that positive experience, you don't avoid it, you expose yourself to the discomfort and you realize it was great, then maybe that starts changing the way you look at yourself. And the next time you're intimate or think about being intimate, you're not so insecure that it overpowers your system, but then maybe you become more excited to try things or just confident in yourself. And maybe that rolls over into what you wear and you're not so worried about it. Like it has the potential to completely change your perspective because that's what safe relationships are supposed to do, right? Trusting the other person to encourage us. When we're even like you and I talking about business, when we have our partners, our spouses supporting and encouraging us, it's just different from a friend supporting and encouraging us. It just means this different kind of love or more deep down confidence that we can then generate for ourselves. And so it applies to body image. It's the same thing. And so I would also love to hear your perspective on kind of the healing piece, because in my mind I'm like, if you open yourself up to your spouse being a part of this, because in your mind if you have body image issues then you're in there a lot, you have a lot that you're worried about, thinking about, obsessing about. But when you open that fear up, not just behaviorally or in intimacy, but in, I'm struggling, I want to talk to you about how this just overwhelms me, then I perceive it as like opportunity to just grow and heal with your spouse that is your safe person. So how do we bring that in?
Well, hopefully, you're having conversations about intimacy in general. And I know that can be awkward for some people, especially people that grew up in homes where it's like, oh, we don't talk about that. And so
Mhm,
that can carry over into marriage. It's not like you go into a marriage and all of a sudden you're this like sex kitten and you're comfortable talking about it, comfortable doing everything. And, it just doesn't work that way. There's no
mhm,
switch that gets flipped. And so that can take some practice and time. But having those conversations so that you guys are communicating how you're feeling, what you like, what you don't like, what feels comfortable, what you guys are willing to try. And I think, the reassurance that a partner can offer someone that is struggling with their body image, and not that that's going to fix everything, but it can be a powerful thing to hear, I love your body and I love you, just the way that you are, and I don't need you to change or whatever it might be in the moment. But those can be really powerful messages. And so communicating that I delight in you, you please me, right? Those sound like really weird things to say out loud, but isn't that what we all
mhm,
want to feel when we're in that vulnerable place with our partner? Is that, they desire us and, they're that they approve. That's really what we all want on a deep level. And so being able to communicate that, whether that's verbally or through touch or a look and eye contact or whatever, everybody's so different about how they communicate and how they receive love. And
mhm.
that's where it's like, again, important to communicate, like, how do
Yeah.
you feel love? What do you like? If I say
Yep.
this, does it fall flat for you or does that mean something for you?
Yeah.
I
And
hate to beat a dead horse, but like
no,
communication is so key.
absolutely. And to your point, it doesn't have to be verbal, right? And so when you think of the different ways that we show and receive love, it, if my husband just holds my hand or just pulls me into a hug unprompted, well, that shows he loves me and he care, like he wants me close or whatever. It doesn't have to be anything intimate or sexual for it to be communicated. I love you and I accept you as you are. Talking to each other about how, like, I care about your day, what's going on. Like, I think sometimes we can get fixated on, if you don't tell me I'm beautiful, then you don't think I'm beautiful. Okay, well, yes, please tell me I'm beautiful. That feels nice. But also, like, just interact with me in a way that shows that you love me and accept me and cherish me and like me and all those things. And then that kind of it trickles down, like it just helps nurture all those deeper issues that we might have with ourselves. And if we can constantly do this for each other all the time, and for some people that's a lot of work because they don't have that, but it's once you get it going, it just becomes this comfortable, like, I just grabbed your hand when we were in the car. I just walked up to you and gave you a quick hug or kiss and kept moving on. Like it's that moments of connection that ultimately show the other person, I love you for who you are. It doesn't matter. I don't have to say that I love your body, even though that's nice. I know you know that I love your body, right? So it's just the whole wraparound kind of approach.
Yeah. And it seems like what I hear you saying is that combination of the physical part of the intimacy and the emotional part of the
Yeah.
intimacy and how those work together and just create that deeper connection and that deeper sense of love and safety with one another. Because obviously there can be physical intimacy without the emotional intimacy, and that may not feel safe, and that may
Yeah.
actually perpetuate problems or whatever. I recently had a client talking about use the word cherish. That was exactly the word she used, is like, I just want to feel cherished. I want it to feel like it's more than just sex. um, something looking for that deeper connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that we should, I think as couples, like we should never stop pursuing connection, right? It looks different on different days and seasons of life. And I don't know, you might connect differently now than you did 10 years ago, but the goal is just to connect and talk about if you feel like you're not connecting. And with that comes the intimate, physical connection and the emotional connection. And for you to be, I don't know. I think it's this whole like to feel fulfilled in ourselves individually and in our relationship, we have to work on ourselves and we have to work on our relationship and just see that the two are so interconnected and never lose sight of that. We are actually coming up to a hard stop. You and I have both things we have to go do, but I wanted to I have a couple of things that I want to kind of put out there. You and I also have a topic we want to do, which is I work, and you do this obviously also, but like I work with a lot of couples or people who have children, especially in this day and age with social media, who are struggling with body image issues. And it looks like, our generation, and you and I haven't talked to this, that my eating disorder stuff didn't start till I was an adult. Whereas a lot of people start as children, but a lot of these kids these days have this reinforcement on social media that I didn't have, you didn't have when we were their age. We had magazines, and that was very invasive. So looking now at the social media, the TikTok, the Instagram, where there is no escape, there's a lot of that I would love to talk to you about and just offer support for parents of how do you talk to your child that when your kind of go-to answer is like you just need to eat, just eat, instead of what's going on, why can't you, all the deeper things that are leading to that. So you and I are going to do an episode on that. But the other thing that I would love to do is a more detailed topic or episode with you about anxiety and OCD, because I'm noticing, I mean, anxiety is always there, but I'm noticing a lot more OCD coming up in clients that I'm working with. And I don't know that people generally understand what OCD is and how common
Mhm.
it actually is.
Yeah, I think you're right. And even I have a client right now that I'm working with, and she was like, man, I've been to a lot of therapists, and like, I had like all the stuff that we've talked about, nobody else recognized that was OCD.
Yeah.
And so some of the types of therapy that we can use can be counterproductive with OCD, and it can actually reinforce it. So that would be great. I would love that.
Yeah.
That is kind of like a newer passion of mine over the
Yeah.
last year or so. I mean, I've always worked with it some because it overlaps with eating disorders quite a bit, but
Yeah.
I've just become more educated and more passionate about that. So I would love to have that conversation.
Yes. Okay, so we'll line those up soon. Okay, so before we go, tell us real quick about you are creating a very, very cool course. Tell us about your course and then tell us where your website where people can find you to learn more about you.
Absolutely. So I am working on a body image course. And I think I told you with the first day that we met like a year ago, I'm like, I should have just started out small. And I didn't. I was so excited about doing it. I have put everything that I know and can think of to help people in this course. So it's taking me a long time to build, but it's going to be, a very thorough course on body image. And I'm on Instagram. at Food Freedom Therapist. And then I have my website at nourishedsoulcenter.com. So if anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out through there. But you can actually on the website sign up for the VIP list for my body image course. I haven't been sending out as much stuff as I would like for that, but it will, if you sign up for that, you'll be one of the first ones to know when it is launched, and probably like have a special deal for being on the VIP list. So feel free to go sign up for that.
Awesome. I'll link to all of that. And it is a virtual on-demand course. So you can access it wherever you are outside of Texas, outside the country. So, all right, girl, I know you have to go. So thank you so much. To be continued. We will schedule our another one and our next one soon, and I'll talk to you later.
Perfect. Thanks
All
so
right.
much.
Bye.